and it is connecting, and it says that we are live right now. If that is in fact correct, then welcome to the show, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to have you all here today, and I'm even more delighted to have the guest of the show, Heidi from Crypto Tips, talking about all of the news in crypto from this week. Welcome to the show, Heidi.
Hey, thanks, Naomi. It's great to be here again, always.
Absolutely, always great to have you. And we have a lot of news this week. We've got a bunch of hacker news, things that people really need to be aware of if they're wanting privacy on the internet and if they're not wanting their funds stolen. We've also got some crazy things that just happened in the last 2 days and really came to a climax this morning. We'll go into that, which is like this YAM phenomenon that appeared out of nowhere and just kind of took the crypto space by storm. We've got the Fed, some interesting announcements coming out of there. I'm wondering what that'll mean for crypto. Giant investment, $250 million investment to like this business intelligence company, Juggernaut. So I'll talk a little bit about that and what for the crypto space, what that means going forward, and some other things going on that we'll get to, but let's just dive straight into it. How's my sound going? I've got my air conditioning going, so I just want to make sure that it's all good. It's so hot, so is sound all good?
It's all good for me, yeah.
All right, guys, you just let me know in there. And if you want me to answer any of your questions on the show, feel free to send a message to my CoinTree page, and I'm absolutely delighted to answer any messages or send a super chat to the message. I'll be skimming through the chat, but as always, I'll be more focused on what Heidi is saying on the show, so it'll be difficult for me to get to both, but I'll post the CoinTree link there in case you are interested, and let's go straight into it. So the top news that I want to just start with, YAM. YAM.
What an appropriate name for DeFi farming. I mean,
yeah. Like, what is this thing? It launches on August 11. It comes out of nowhere. Suddenly it's everywhere in my feed. Eric Voorhees is tweeting about it saying like, this is a scam, guys. This is a pump and dump thing. Everyone else is saying, no, it's really cool. Like, it's an interesting project, right? So let's just talk about what it is first, and then we'll explain what this saga was. So it's based on an idea of like an elastic supply model. Do you want to go into an explanation of what that means?
It's just really an effort to achieve some sort of stability within the coin without having necessarily it being pegged to a fiat currency. I mean, it's like referencing the dollar as its value, but adjusting its supply as is needed to achieve its stability, really.
Absolutely. So it's like based on basic laws of supply and demand. So either you can, increase the supply of something which devalues the coin, or you can, decrease the supply of something which generally makes something more scarce and increases the value, or, there are different ways that you can change the variables in the supply demand curve that changes the value of something. And generally stable coins are like pegged to the US dollar in that, you get like, you mint them and you burn them and you make sure that the supply is stable and it's like keeping up with everything going on. But like they have a completely different model, and it's based on something that Ampleforth came up with. So just this idea that the way it works in practice is, let's say you have let's say the price of YAM skyrockets. Well, then they'll aim to devalue that by printing a huge amount and then allocating it to everyone's wallet. Sort of the same way that your US dollar gets completely devalued every time they do quantitative easing and just print a whole bunch more that they just inject straight into traditional finance. So this is like crypto experimenting with this, but trying to create like a stable amount from that. Now, what happened since then? So it was released 2 days ago. Do you want to give us an overview of like the biggest news since then? Because it seems interesting. Maybe this will work. Did this work, Heidi?
In short, no, absolutely not. It is, I mean, I understand what Eric Voorhees was calling it, a scam and pump and dump and whatever. On one hand, it seemed like they were saying all the right things. They wanted a fair distribution of coins. They were trying to achieve some sort of stability in their coin. And at the same time, they're also sure to warn all their investors, this is an experiment. And turns out they were launching unaudited code. And the second that a bug popped up, a secondary bug popped up, and pretty much they didn't have time to address one without the other. And long story short, it pretty much killed the whole project and their ability to, I think, adjust their supply, which is essentially the whole role of their coin.
Absolutely. Like I think the killer bug was that the protocol was just going to keep on printing like these dud YAM tokens, and that would prevent users from making any sort of governance decisions. And so I think that it crashed over 90%. Then the founder admitted failure, wrote a note. So this was Brock Elmore, who just wrote on Twitter. And honestly, I feel bad for this guy, but also, like, first, let me read the tweet first. It says, "I'm sorry, everyone, I failed. Thank you for the insane support today. I'm sick with grief. And I understand why, because over $100 million was pumped into this." Now, let's take a step back. This was unaudited code. And as you said, on the 11th, when they launched, they warned people. They tweeted out, "We were serious about this being an experiment and the code being unaudited. Please exercise some caution." People were like, YOLO!
Give me your money.
And so $100 million went in and it's gone. So I do wonder, like, I mean, Eric's point, again, he did say that he doesn't really understand how it works. He got a lot of pushback. Eric always gets a lot of pushback. Got a lot of pushback where people say, well, how about you just understand it first before you tweet? But his point is that, you know, this is unaudited code. It seems more like a silly game, like people are testing out things. I kind of agree. Like, it's an interesting idea. It's interesting because I always am interested in monetary policy and how like experiments and how different things would play out when it comes to game theory and actually enacting these things. But would I put my money into this? And would I put a lot of my money into this? No.
It's exactly a point of, like, I think they launched that code so quickly because they wanted to take advantage of the hype of the DeFi space right now. And it's what a lot of ICOs did. They didn't even have to launch any code, actually. But what's different this time around is that they're actually competing with functioning platforms, and people are actually going to be using this. And so they're flooded with users. And with that comes a whole bunch of bugs to be exploited or, visualized quite quickly. So it is a giant experiment. And we are seeing all these epic experiments happening, and it's really interesting to see them some go up in a flash and okay, that didn't work clearly.
That was quick, just get that over and done with quickly.
But still, I'm sure it was a learning experience and it was a good idea, and I'm sure it'll be, you know, pursued in one way or another. Whether these guys, you know, try it again or not, we'll have to see. But it's a wait and see kind of a thing, really. Is like, okay, what experiment lasts the longest and learns the most and makes the most difference, I think.
No, I completely agree. And I love the experimentation in this space. I love that we can experiment now before people would try to have alternate money and the government would just like shut it down immediately. So I love that we're in this world where it's kind of this permissionless space. They can go after companies, but it's just a lot harder to shut down now. It's an explosion, this Cambrian explosion, as Gabrielle likes to call it. But I'm excited about it too. There are some shitty experiments out there. Mind my language, guys, but terrible, terrible experiments that I'm not even going to give them credit and say, well, good to try. Like some of them you're like, no, this is not going to work. But I don't want to hate on experimentation in general. I love that we can do this now. I love that we have the freedom to do it, and people can put their money where they choose to. Only advice is just do your research, look to people in the space who have like assess this. What are they saying? Make sure you understand the risks, basically. Yeah. So one more thing that I just want to mention that was kind of a shock and came out of nowhere. So YAM like completely overtook the headlines the last 2 days. Everywhere I look, and I'm like, did I miss something? Like, what's YAM? I've never heard of this, and I realized because it was launched 2 days ago and has since failed. So that was funny, but like also something that came out of nowhere. Chainlink's rise to fame. Like, I mean, I'm going to be talking in depth on the show tomorrow about Chainlink, so I'm not going to go into it in detail today. Paul Puey of Edge Wallet and I will be doing a deep dive into the technical aspects, the history, etc. But one thing I will just mention is that it's now the number 5 cryptocurrency. It's surpassed Bitcoin Cash. It's like, I know there was an article out that says that it's the most traded cryptocurrency of the past 24 hours. This was yesterday.
Wow.
Coinbase Pro, the biggest crypto exchange in the US. So, you know, this is like well, like this is something that's kind of moving at the moment. So I just want to mention that rocket launch there. It has been rising previously, but now it's just surged. So we'll go into detail tomorrow. But now let's talk about Bitcoin in particular. I want to talk about MicroStrategy's investment. So do you want to give us an overview of what happened there? Because I think this is a big deal for crypto space and for Bitcoin.
Yeah, pretty much. So MicroStrategies is a business intelligence company that pretty much is built to call the trends, right? Or like to be kind of ahead of the curve, even though they're just now, if they're just now buying Bitcoin, that can be
we're ahead of the curve.
But they in the article, that one of the articles that came out, it said that they were like a two-pronged attack of how they're going to maybe adjust their investments. And one was regarding distributing their cash flow or cash reserves. And then the other prong was to invest in better pretty much hedges against inflation. And they listed like set like the possibility for several different assets, but they went all in on Bitcoin. And I think that speaks volumes. And they say multiple like positive things about Bitcoin. They're obviously coming around to it and understanding how well it matches up against the inflation of fiat currencies.
Absolutely.
So yeah, they're a Fortune 500 company. And I think it's just another indication of validation of Bitcoin to the masses.
I completely agree. I want to read some of the specific things that they said, because it was like, as you said, they're talking about this as a hedge against inflation. They're saying like, we don't trust all of the inflation that's going on in the worldwide economy or the quantitative easing. Therefore, we're putting our money into Bitcoin. And I'm just like, what? So let me read some of these things. Our investment in Bitcoin is part of our new capital allocation strategy, which seeks to maximize long-term value for our shareholders. So they're saying that Bitcoin will help to maximize long-term value for people. Yep. It is a dependable store of value and attractive investment asset with more long-term appreciation potential than holding cash. Of course, because cash is just going to, and Bitcoin is going up at the same time. It is a significant addition to the global financial system. It's like they're talking about this like this major player that it is now. They're like accepting the reality, this foothold that that Bitcoin has made. I should call a stronghold now. Now it says it has recognized Bitcoin as a legitimate investment asset that could be superior to cash, and accordingly has made Bitcoin the principal holding in its Treasury Reserve strategy. As you said, it's principal holding in its Treasury Reserve strategy. Now, what is a Treasury Reserve strategy? Again, you know, as you already went into, it's this idea that they want something backing them up. If their investments or whatever don't work out, they want something there. And they're thinking like the stock market, is this really going to be the future with all of this, you know, quantitative easing going on, and with especially with COVID and the economy just being crazy, and these lockdowns and everything's just shutting down, all these bankruptcies. So they're thinking, okay, where else do we put our money if we can't trust that businesses are going to stay around? And if we can't trust that cash is going to be worth anything, where do we put it? They've said Bitcoin. So the other thing I want to mention that they said that this is great. Those macro factors, they're talking about the factors why they got involved. These macro factors include, among other things, economic and public health crisis precipitated by COVID-19, unprecedented government financial stimulus measures. So being government financial stimulus measures. I'm liking that they're catching on to this thing like a new thing. This isn't just like 2008. This is unprecedented. They have taken those strategies and just like mega-sized them. So including quantitative easing being adopted around the world and global political and economic uncertainty. So what does this mean? Like, what are your thoughts, Heidi? Like, does this mean, are these people going to be trailblazers? Like, they are thought leaders in this sector. They influence a lot of people who make their decisions about different companies. What's this going to do for Bitcoin?
I mean, I think it's epic as long as they hold. But also looking at the amount of Bitcoin that they purchased, that's like 1/100th of the total max supply of Bitcoin. Let's say that, you know, no one ever lost any Bitcoin and there is a possibility of having 21 million in liquidity in Bitcoin. They have 1/100th of it. That means like only, like, I'm not going to sell all my Bitcoin, certainly. And I'm not the only one. There's many hodlers of last resort. And so for them to have that kind of a stake in it, there's not that many other companies that are going to have, the ability to have the access to that amount of coins in the near future. I think a lot of people are going to be increasingly waking up to the faultiness of their fiat currency. And yeah, I think it's amazing to see them trusting Bitcoin for their long-term investments and for really the well-being of their own business, which is a big one. So it's definitely a nod of approval, a big one.
Absolutely. And also it's interesting because we did see a big crash in Bitcoin when the markets crashed. You understand that people are playing in both markets, so they might pull things from liquid assets so that they can prop up, their holdings, etc. And so there's always been a large correlation between like the S&P and Bitcoin. But it's interesting now that they're saying, actually, we don't think that correlation is going to continue. Maybe short term, we're seeing that still, but long term, we see a divergence. That was really interesting to me. And then they said they chose Bitcoin. You said, we find the global acceptance, brand recognition, ecosystem vitality, network dominance, architectural resilience, technical utility, and community ethos of Bitcoin. Bitcoin to be persuasive evidence of its superiority as an asset class for those seeking a long-term store of value. I mean, and they said Bitcoin is digital gold, harder, stronger, faster, and smarter than any money that has preceded it. Like, they just keep like upping their comments, and I just think that it's really exciting. As you started out by explaining, these people are thought leaders. They have this 30-year track record of anticipating trends. So, I mean, they're a little late to the game for when you compare it to people who are watching this show. You guys are spot on. But I think it's pretty cool that they're writing something like this and encouraging people to look at this.
They're probably also saying all those positives because now they have their position in Bitcoin. So they're okay that other people want to get in now too.
Right, exactly. Like we don't really have an opinion yet, meaning like we're trying to figure out how much to allocate and the logistics of making that happen. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. Let's move on to the next item here, which is interesting to do with the Fed. Before we do that, I want to mention I've got some super chats here, so I just want to say thank you to you people. Nice. So Wally, thank you so much. Absolutely love your content. Keep it up. Learn and don't get burned. I like that. I should add that as like a catchphrase. That's great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. Andre Amorin, who sent me a cool little fist bump GIF. That's really cool. I think that's the first moving sticker that I've ever received on a super chat. Nice. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And then wait a second. What have we got here? I think that was everything. If I missed one, then let me know. Nothing on CoinTree, but feel free to send crypto instead of dirty fiat, guys. Always fun. So I want to talk about that dirty fiat creator, the Federal Reserve. Now, when Bitcoin first came on the scene, it was like one of the best features of this is these instantaneous transactions. People like that they could just send money to the other side of the world and it was instantaneous. There is no middleman, there's no settlement layer that is needed. And a lot of people said, well, now we've improved money. We've never had innovation in money before. We've had a monopoly on money, but now we have competition. So it's going to force people to lift their game. And I think that's what we're now seeing. So the Federal Reserve, they've started to release details of what they're calling their FedNow service. This was released, was announced to start with about a year ago. And now they've just started to talk about their timeline and their plans. And honestly, it seems like they're being forced into a position where they actually have to, shock horror, make improvements about how traditional finance works. Do you want to outline what this plan is? And then we can talk about the pros and cons of that.
I mean, I'm not a complete expert on the clearinghouse, the ACH, but yeah, I'm not really totally familiar exactly what this is. I know it's a supplement of the ACH clearinghouse that all the national banks in the US use to make interbank transfers. So apparently FedNow is going to somehow supplement this to make it instantaneous, which is interesting. And again, you said they launched it last year, but in this article I'm reading on the official federalreserve.org website, it says that they are excited. I am pleased to announce the Federal Reserve Board has approved the core features and functionality based on an extensive input from stakeholders. So it took them an entire year just to get approval of their plan, pretty much.
Right.
And then it says their expected launch date to be in the year 2023 or 2024. So 3 or 4 years. Obviously, we're seeing them have to step up the game because Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies just blow that system out of the water, the current system. So, you know, they're like you said, they're forced into having to make improvements for their citizens finally. So, you know, they're going to be benefiting at least from that. Who knows exactly what kind of privacy or other things are going to be attached to this new service. It's obviously not going to be too friendly on the users. But
what, something that the Fed's involvement with, you know, they're not going to be primarily focused on user experience. That's shocking to me. Shocking.
Probably not going to be giving them the benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, but their need for all of this, obviously regulations and approval from shareholders and all of this stuff. It's like, it's not an agile system whatsoever. And for them to have to compete with something like, can you imagine where crypto is going to be in 3 or 4 years? Like, this is how far we've advanced so far.
And then they'll be almost ready to launch because their timeline is like a few years out from now.
Yeah.
So it's like, by the time they finally catch up, crypto's going to be on like, I don't know, we're all holograms and we're just like living in the ether. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to look nothing like what the Fed is trying to roll out right now.
Not to mention, like, the settlement layer of this payment system is still deeply flawed, and that will always be something that you know, these limited supply cryptocurrencies will have over any fiat currency, is that value of the limited supply.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about that settlement layer. So when they had this extensive review process that you talked about, some of the feedback was, oh no, this is going to be unfair competition for the monopoly that controls all of the clearing in America. And so, like, basically what's going on at the moment in how this whole awful financial system works is we basically have one central institution, which is this like private institution, but when it's owned by all of these banks that have a direct credit line to the Fed, you wonder how private that actually is. It's like this awful, insidious, like incestuous mishmash of corporatism and cronyism going on. But basically they control everything. Every payment goes through this system, and it's called the clearinghouse. And now the Fed has said, well, we're going to create an alternative because we think that that's too like a systemic risk. It's a single point of failure. And meanwhile, the industry's saying, no, that's unfair competition. You're not allowed to compete with us there. I can understand part of why they're saying that, because often when the government creates these competing programs, they subsidize the hell out of them, which means that taxpayers are subsidizing them, and so they're able to undercut, you know, people who are legitimately providing services. I'm not going to apply that to this case though, because we literally got this cartel, this monopoly on clearinghouse where people have to go through it. So on the one hand, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. We have a little bit of competition going on there. I wonder what's going to happen. But let's talk about some of the drawbacks. Like, this isn't, as you said, Heidi, this isn't going to be any competition for Bitcoin, which just moves at, you know, rapid speed without all these barriers. Like, I mean, so we've got here, like a history about the clearinghouse. Like, it's a banking association and payments company that's owned by the largest commercial banks. It dates back to 1853. And if you look at kind of the history of what they've done, so let me just drag down here. It's like, I can't find it here. Oh, here. So 1907, stock market crashes. And then led by JP Morgan and JD Rockefeller, the clearinghouse stepped up and started lending money to banks until this panic subsided. And it was sort of this like group of banks that joined together and said, okay, well, we will, you know, be a resource if things like that happened. But then on their website, you go there and it talks about like, well, they're a place to foster industry collaboration and you know, create coordination where necessary. So, okay, seems reasonable. I understand that when you're dealing with like all these different systems, like banks have to be able to accept other banks' checks. You know, there has to be like an industry standard. Okay, I can see why that would be useful. And then it starts to say like their thought leaders in the banking industry, they foster this collaboration, but the wording just starts to seem like, and then they talk about like directing public policy, legislation, regulation of payments. And it's like, wait a second. This is a giant, incredibly powerful institution owned by the biggest banks in America. Like the people involved with this. So we've got Chase and Citibank and Wells Fargo and TD, like they're all involved with this. They all use this real-time payment solution that they implemented a few years ago. It just seems like this incredibly powerful group that lobbies the government and gets really good legislation passed that, you know, is to their advantage, but to the detriment of any competition or anyone entering. Like this is a bad system. And so like, and it's so confusing too. Like we've got ACH payments, but it's ACH payments, people say like, well, we've got that as well as this other clearinghouse thing, and which is different to wire, but like ACH is all controlled by the clearinghouse, which is their name, the clearinghouse. So like, I mean, basically like in essence, what I'm trying to say is like, this is this giant behemoth, very powerful organization. And they're now in competition with the Federal Reserve, another giant behemoth institution. Both of them are just like immersed in bureaucracy. As you mentioned, they're moving at snail's pace to get these things done. And they're saying like, this is going to help payments. I don't know, like Heidi, what are your thoughts on this? Like how much is this going to help? Like I understand that the private sector has been kind of, you know, putting band-aids on this bad system and trying to make it better for a while. PayPal tried to make it better before, but then they said, no, you can't have this digital coin. Well, it's illegal, so they had to pivot. People have been trying to make this system work, and maybe this is the change that we're looking for. Like maybe it will make Bitcoin work harder. If a big perk of Bitcoin is that these instantaneous transfers, and now this institution is going to make instantaneous transfers a possibility. I mean, is that going to be competition for Bitcoin, or do you think that Bitcoin's so far out of their league that this isn't even an issue?
I mean, to a certain extent, competition can be great, and if Bitcoin, you know, needs it, because it's like, you know, the biggest network or whatever, it has that going for it, and it's, you know, the original and the longest lasting crypto. And I guess, yeah, similar to that would be the Federal Reserve. No, it's not. I mean, I really just think that they're doing this to try to stay relevant. And there's still a lot of flaws with it. And people, I think, will continue to see that. And as time moves on, as with everything, time will tell that those flaws will continue to show, especially brighter compared to something as non-political really as Bitcoin is, and not all these big banks, you know, getting it's all from the free market participating in it. It's not from these lobbyists or from, you know, certain laws, or it's, yeah, I find it really hard to believe that this is actually competition for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there are all kinds of things going on with this clearinghouse system and rules for banks. Like there's this Federal Reserve Board Regulation D, which basically is this federal legislation that says that you cannot have more than 6, what's the word when you take something out? God, mental blank. 6 withdrawals. Thank you. Brain is finally working. So you can't have more than 6 withdrawals from your savings account in a month. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is a federal rule that most people don't know about until, you know, you do it more than 6 times and then you get giant penalties and you're like, what? So this is a rule that was put in place because the federal government said, well, we don't want runs on banks. So in order to solve this issue and make sure that the banks have enough funds, we'll curtail the customers' choices. Like rather than saying, well, you guys need more reserves, of course they're not going to say that. They're at the behest of these giant lobby groups who are making sure that, you know, they get whatever they want and they can have the tiniest fraction of a reserve possible in order to, you know, satisfy me. So they curtail the customers because the customers aren't banding together and saying, well, I would like seven withdrawals. So like things like that are in effect, which just, I think that's what makes our banking system a nightmare, because there are all these rules that are put in place to make the banks' jobs easier and to make it harder on customers. And I mean, I like what you said, like the competition from Bitcoin, I hope that it's pushing this awful system into a better place, but I don't have much hope that it's going to succeed.
They're probably going to do just the bare minimum, you know, just enough. Okay.
Yeah, but they'll be over budget and
of course
time in delivering it, and you know, meanwhile the taxpayers cover everything there. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's not technically a Fed coin. I'm sorry, Frank, who's listening, who's been telling me that Fed coin, when it's released, is going to be much better. As far as I can tell, cryptocurrency is not involved with this, and details of how this is actually going to work are not yet clear, and it's not going to be released until like 2023, 2024. But it is this interesting, like, instant payment mechanism. I don't know. I'm gonna stick with Bitcoin. That's not enough for me to make me want to sell my Bitcoin and go back into fiat.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to something interesting going on. Oh, and before I do that, I actually got another super chat. Yeah, thank you guys. Oroteo, Heidi and Naomi making crypto great again. Absolutely. So yeah,
it's always been great.
It's always been great. Yeah, if you guys make sure that you are going to Heidi's page, make sure that you're following her. I've already put a link in the description to her page, so make sure you check it out. She has an incredible channel, so much information that like walks you through news and like tutorials and all that. So make sure you go and follow her there. Heidi, do you have a CoinTree site as well?
No, I don't actually.
Oh, you got to make one of those. If you end up making one later, I'll also add that to the video description. That means that you guys can go send her crypto tips as well. And see what I did there? Totally accidental. Wish I could take credit for that. You send her some crypto tips. And then your Google doesn't take 33%. So that's always nice as well. And we've got Uvas who sent a message, said, are mods allowed to tip? Uvas, absolutely. And thank you for being a moderator. I have like a handful of people in my chat that I just added as a moderator because they're such awesome people. They're just always there. They're so enthusiastic about the crypto space. So I'm like, all right, you can help navigate this crazy chat thing. So Uvas, thank you for being one of those moderators, and thank you for the tip as well. All right, let's move on. I want to talk about Bitcoin Cash and another fork. Like, what, a fork? So let's, where to start with this? So, okay, maybe we start from a broad overview. The great thing about cryptocurrency is that if you don't agree with someone, you're not forced into a system you disagree with. You can fork off and do your own thing. And I think that's great, because it gives people choices that they didn't have before. You know, we're forced, like politically, economically, we've been forced into these systems where we have to follow these rules, and there's really no way to opt out. And so I love that in crypto, you can opt out. You can fork code, you can leave the community, you can go into a different coin altogether. Like, there are lots of different ways that you can exercise your freedom of choice. There's a catch to that though, because when you're dealing with something that needs to be used as currency, you are relying on a network effect. You are relying on other people finding what you created to be valuable. So it's not just a matter of me creating Naomi Heidi coin and saying like, this is a really cool coin, guys. You should all own Naomi Heidi coin. No one's gonna buy it except probably Heidi and myself. Let's be honest. You know, when you start forking projects, you lose community. Community gets divided. Oftentimes the community doesn't stay in both camps. You know, when you look at Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, it was very rare to find someone who was like, I'll stay in both. I was one of the people who stayed in both. I found them both useful. But it isn't common. Generally, it becomes very tribal. You get another split. You get BSV, BCH. Again, not amicable. It's very, very ferocious split, antagonistic. And so you also lose developer resources as well, because you have to choose which one you're going to work for. And so there's less people, you know, giving quality inputs to things. Like, everything's fragmented and divided. So although you have freedom of choice, you have to understand the trade-offs that come with that. It isn't like an absolute. So it's like, yes, we'll go and do our own thing, and that's obviously the better choice. So BCH has been shrouded with a lot of controversy, a lot of disagreement. It's not unlike every other crypto space, to be honest.
Yeah.
All of them have these disagreements, but you generally don't really hear about them unless you're part of those communities. But BCH has been dealing with this for a while. And so, Heidi, do you want to just give us an overview of like what this latest fork is potentially referring to, and this post that Bitcoin.com posted the other day?
So admittedly, I'm not totally have my thumb on the pulse of Bitcoin Cash, but in November, there's a scheduled software upgrade that it has to do with like kind of like not a DAO, but like a funding mechanism for Bitcoin Cash and how it will be allocated for the software development of Bitcoin Cash. And apparently some people aren't so into it. Maybe it's not as developed as it should be. Maybe some people don't think it's ready or it's not needed or for whatever their reasons are. So that's a very high level understanding of this.
Well, no, it's the essence of it.
Yeah, but this article is it's well written, but it's interesting because this kind of the argument is essentially about governance. And, that's what a hard fork is when you can't come to a consensus and it's a contentious hard fork and people split off. And so essentially any kind of writing about a potential hard fork is kind of like campaign for whatever side of the hard fork you think other miners should be allocating their computing power towards. And Bitcoin.com is very clearly against this, what is it, the IFP? And that's the funding mechanism that is up for debate. They're against it. It's pretty much saying, I think they said it very vaguely that it's just not really where it should be to be implemented at this point. And they reiterate that they've been funding a lot of Bitcoin Cash development and providing a lot of supportive things like they have the exchange, they have wallet, they have Bitcoin.com games and things. So it's kind of like a little bit of a promo piece for themselves as well. But they're definitely trying to, I think, they had one phrase, but it seemed like they were speaking for the whole community, saying like most people in the
it was like referring to the miners, I believe.
Yeah, like most miners aren't going to be into it, so you shouldn't either, and we're not, so like be on our side. So I mean, again, I'm not in it. I don't know exactly at what this IFP is, or how it would be delegating funds, or who is in control of it, or what lets you have any say or vote or whatever. Maybe you have more insight on that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that you talk about this as like them rallying the troops beforehand, because that's something, because this is sort of a battle between Bitcoin, between ABC and everyone else. And a lot of people kind of banded together and created this alternate node, which is called the Bitcoin Cash node. And so it's like this battle that's been going on. And like, I can see both sides in all of this, but it's interesting that Bitcoin.com is now saying, let's all rally together, because that's something that Amory, who's the director of ABC, or as he likes to call it, benevolence dictator, he has been saying for a long time. He talks constantly about shelling points. He talks about how the Bitcoin Cash community is this fragmented beast that never comes together, and that the reason why, Bitcoin Cash and BSV, why that fork was so devastating is because beforehand, no one told people where they were going to stand. Bitcoin.com came in at the last minute and kind of saved the day and saved Bitcoin Cash. But they didn't announce it in advance. If they announced it in advance, perhaps there would have been other miners who'd be like, oh yeah, I see who's going to have the majority. I just want to earn money. I just want to go there. Or for whatever reason, they might have been persuaded because they're thought leaders or whatever. So there are lots of reasons why it's important to kind of stake your position beforehand. And Amory has constantly been saying, you guys don't do this. There is no cohesion, And meanwhile, people on the other camp, it's funny that people on the other side often will say, well, you can't state that stuff. That's collusion, all of that, which I think is rubbish. But it's interesting now that Bitcoin.com has said now, this is our allegiance. If this happens, this is what we will do. I think that that's helpful. It lays a path out. It lets people know what to expect. I really hope that Bitcoin Cash doesn't fork.
Yeah.
You know,
I kind of
ahead.
bringing it really to the public for discussion. And again, maybe, you know, saying publicly what side you're on, it brings that more. I mean, it's kind of, I feel like hard forks are like a marriage and you should try to keep it together. Try to work through, you know what I mean? Like,
it's never easy getting along, but
because then it gets so complicated.
Yeah, there are definite benefits if you can, you know, stick it
for
together.
sure. For sure. So, I mean, I'm not sure if this exactly such an important issue that it would justify a hard fork, you know, or if it's something that can be delayed. Again, I'm not totally up to date on what's happening here, but yeah.
Well, it's kind of this bait and switch that happened, which is kind of, it's fascinating following the politics. I try to keep up with everything going on in like different camps. It's difficult, but Bitcoin Cash recently, with everything going on, I've been kind of just watching it all to see how this is going to play out. So it was kind of, they were, first of all, ABC was wanting this different difficulty adjustment algorithm forward, because as you know, like with Bitcoin Cash, there are issues there. You know, sometimes a block just won't be mined for a really long time. There's lots of irregularity. And so they were trying to figure out, how do we patch this? Different camps came out with different ideas. ABC, which builds the code, and I mean, they do an incredible job building tremendous code that everyone makes use of in Bitcoin Cash, and honestly, their contribution has been incredible. And so it's interesting how this played out, because everyone sort of started rallying around this other one, and then ABC said, okay, we're going to implement this different one. So it was like Grasberg versus, what was it, Assert. And everyone's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Why are you suddenly coming and saying that this is what you're going to implement? And everyone got like angry about that. And they were like, just because you're a big player and you contribute a lot, you think you can dictate all of this. I mean, I've listened to people on both sides who have valid arguments about this. And in the end, Amri did back down and said, okay, we won't implement it then. We'll back down on this. Instead of this, we will reintroduce this very controversial infrastructure funding plan that was already debated and was very, you know, it was just, it was volcanic, this debate before, people calling it a Bitcoin Cash tax. So it's essentially the idea behind it is that a portion of each each newly mined coin,
I see,
would go towards infrastructure. And honestly, I see that as that's worked in Zcash. They sunsetted that, but then they all voted to reintroduce it because they saw that as a really valid way to get funding. People in Bitcoin Cash, in the most part, it seems, really dislike it because it's not something they're used to. I have a different view, plus I don't know where you stand. I think that rather than saying like, well, that's Zcash and we differentiate ourselves from them, I prefer the view of like, everyone's experimenting with different things. Let's learn from other coins and see what's worked. This has worked for Zcash. Their tech that they've been developing, because they've had incredible resources to hire the best level cryptographers. Like, I think we can learn from that. But that being said, the way all of this was introduced, and now Bitcoin ABC, they come in and they say, well, we're introducing this no matter what. I know you didn't like it, but we're going to do it. I understand where they're coming from. It's tremendously hard to get funding in crypto. This open source model is rare. It works for very few systems. You've got like the Linux Foundation, which is fantastic, but we don't have that yet. We do not have in crypto, like Bitcoin, we've started to see it, but even that I would say is not enough funding. Other coins, we definitely have not seen this, enough funding to support development just from voluntary donations, or just like carving out like developers and saying, you know, we will, as a large company, we're going to allocate one developer to work full time on this. You know, we haven't seen that. So how do we get funding? This I thought was a legitimate option. People disagreed, but now Anne-Marie's coming in and saying, we're going to do it regardless. So I understand where it's coming from. Not sure it's the best idea. And now that Bitcoin.com has fled its allegiance, I would have to say, like, I really hope that they don't go through with it. I know that they need funding, and I really hope that there's another way. And I understand the frustration when they can't find another way. They've been working so hard and they've contributed so much.
I mean, it's a really consistent way to get funding, and it's an option that is kind of unbiased because it's not connected to any person who might want to sway the software one way or another. So it's Yeah, I agree with you completely. It's an interesting experiment.
Well, that actually, just like a quick interjection there, it may be the issue. So what Bitcoin.com was saying in their letter was how that they don't really have this governance model. Like, how is the allocation of this like percentage going to be decided? Where does it go to? Because that wasn't figured out, they didn't want to get involved.
I see. That makes sense too.
Yeah. So like on that point, like what would be your thoughts? Like, you know, I don't know, have you seen any other coins that perhaps have interesting models that you think people should be aware of, we maybe could learn from? Or like, what's your general take on funding in the crypto space?
I mean, I think DAOs are great, but what's interesting about that is, you know, trying to determine who is qualified to vote. If one person, like for EOS, it's always been one coin, one vote. Someone who's invested only one coin, do they really have enough invested to care enough to vote, you know, in the best interest of the, or to be educated, you know, put that enough effort to actually understand the issues at hand? Or, you know, you're required to have a whole bunch of coins to vote, but then it's only the rich controlling, you know, you put a barrier up. So I don't know, hopefully there's a happy medium somewhere, but we have to keep trying, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting though. That's something that's brand new also. Like decentralized autonomous organizations are really cool. And it's just, it's like really mind blowing if you just kind of just understand how everything in our life and how it can be organized in a decentralized manner. And yeah, it's pretty cool seeing it all develop, but yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think all of this experimentation is exciting. I love the idea of not just decentralizing currency, but decentralizing trust, decentralizing governance mechanism. It's cool that we're living through this and seeing these first experiments play out. We'll have to see what happens with Bitcoin Cash. I hope you guys, you know, I don't know. We'll go into it more detail in another show. But basically, this gets frozen in place in 2 days. I think it's the 15th, and after that, the upgrade that's frozen until the upgrade takes place in November. So if they don't change their minds, then we'll probably have a fork in November. So we'll see what happens there. Oh dear. All right, let's go on. I want to just give a quick update about the Twitter hack, and then I wanted to go on and talk about this giant TOR hack that's been going on and tips for how you can protect yourselves there. So quick overview, this Twitter hack. Do you want to just give us an overview of what happened middle of last year in case people somehow missed that because they're not involved with the world? Actually, before you do that, Heidi, I just got a CoinTree donation that says, "Hi Naomi, thanks for getting Heidi on the show."
Nice.
If you set up a CoinTree page, I will send that donation to you because it seems they are fans of you. So thank you, anonymous, whoever that was, as much appreciated. All right, so give us an overview of the Twitter hack.
So a 17-year-old busted into Twitter and used his skills for evil, and he was holding a Bitcoin hack targeting all the big names, presidents. Oprah, I don't think he got Oprah, but he got like all the big names pretty much. And he was able to he convinced people to send him, I think around 117 or over $100,000 worth of Bitcoin. I'd be interested to know how they tracked it and actually found their identity through that. His fault, I think, was using Bitcoin because it's not actually a privacy coin or any anonymity attached to that one.
Yeah. And I'll just interject quickly because someone's like, Bitcoin Twitter hack, isn't that old news? No. They just found the person who was the 17-year-old that Heidi mentioned. And there were 2 others as well involved, and they just had the hearings this week. So walk us through all of that stuff.
Yeah, so there's some comedy in here a little bit if you look hard enough. So,
you have an interesting dark sense of humor.
You got to find the silver lining. Yeah. So there's a 17-year-old from Florida, a 22-year-old from Florida, and maybe a 19-year-old from the UK, I believe. Yeah. They were involved with gaining access to Twitter inside information through, I think they targeted some employees from Twitter, and then they kind of got in the back end from there. And they launched these, I'm being charitable today. Send me whatever Bitcoin and I'll double it. I'll send it right back to you, but double. It's like a classic scam that I hope no one falls for, because
don't be that person, guys.
Absolutely too good to be true. So yeah, they had a hearing, and it's interesting. This guy, I think it was a 17-year-old, correct? That was actually, yeah, he was investigated the year before, and it's a 17-year-old. Maybe he was 16 at that time. He had 400 Bitcoin seized. That's a massive amount of Bitcoin. And 300 of those Bitcoin were returned to him. So I don't know what the feds did with the other 100.
And I don't know. I couldn't find what he did. Like, what
yeah, me neither.
Was like,
or why they only gave back 300 out of 400. Yeah. So his bail is set at $725,000. Assuming he's still in possession of this Bitcoin and he was okay with selling them, he can cover his own bail. It's also interesting because bail is usually posted for like dangerous crimes or like aggravated crimes, and he's 17 years old and they have that high of a bail for it. Yeah. It's just, I think they're setting, it's really interesting seeing all these court cases regarding cryptocurrencies and the precedents that they're setting.
So draconian. They're like making example cases.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have said, well, if he stole like $100 million in this hack, how about he give back $100 million to post-bail and not be allowed to use a computer, you know? Like,
no, they're going to have to pay back 7 times that. And yeah, so what is real? Okay, so this 17-year-old is pretty ballsy. He hacked Twitter. He tried to do a scam through that, used Bitcoin, lapse of judgment. Maybe he's not as good of a hacker because he was identified. But he also is pleading not guilty to all of the 30 felony charges against him. So
yeah, and during the hearing was hacked as well. So in the middle of, so everything's like COVID.
Zoom bombs.
Yeah, and COVID is like locking down things. The hearing was on Zoom, and suddenly the hearing gets bombarded with porn. So that happens.
I didn't know what it was for sure, but it said Zoom bombs. It had a good, so I don't know. They obviously didn't finish the hearing.
Yeah, well, I think they managed to like tone it down. Then they went back to it, but nothing has been decided yet. Like we don't know the outcome of this yet. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy. We're running out of time here. So I just wanted to update people that like everyone was talking about what is this? Was this an undercover government ploy? Are they giving Bitcoin a bad name? Like it ends up being a 17-year-old in Florida, maybe. Yeah. I mean, he hasn't been convicted yet, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Especially when the government is known to frame high profile Bitcoin people, but maybe that's not the case here. Maybe he is guilty. We'll find out what they decide at least. But it's such a I mean, it's kind of expected. Either it was a false flag because it was such an uninspired and unsophisticated hack, or it was an unsophisticated person. So it seems like it's probably the latter. I just, all right, you tried, buddy. All right, let's move on because I want to finish off by talking about this TOR hack.
Yeah, for sure.
This is super important. You want to give us an overview of like what happened here, and then maybe we can go into details about what people could do to protect themselves.
Yeah, so I've never used Tor just because I am super paranoid and I'm not trying to dip my toe into something that's over my head and is obviously swimming with hackers and people who are really good at getting in. But so apparently Tor works through a network of kind of nodes that communicate with each other, and this particular incident was targeting people who were using cryptocurrency sites for like Bitcoin mixing. And what happened was this hack, it was like a long game kind of a hack. And I think they started in January, slowly adding what they're called exit nodes, I believe.
Yeah. And the exit node, like it's part of this like hopping, this onion routing that happens where you peel back, you don't know that person's going from A to B because in between A and B you have like all these other places. But yeah, as you said, they started hacking the final exit
the end
node.
Site. Yeah. And so over like 4 months, they had a quarter of all Tor exit relays. That means if you use Tor between like January or like in May, or was it March? In May, you had like a 1 in 4 chance of having been through one of these. But so what they were doing is they were replacing the HTTPS, they're called the SSL stripping, the HTTPS URLs, and replacing them with HTTP, which is far less secure, and it lets them pretty much see everything that you're doing or enter into your computer that way. And so what they were doing is these people who are using these Bitcoin mixing services, they would change, like with Bitcoin mixing, you send Bitcoin in and it gets sent to all these different other addresses, and then it comes back to a wallet that you allocate to receive it back. And these hackers were changing that receiving address. And so these people were sending in Bitcoin and it was coming out and going into the hacker. So it makes me wonder if these people, maybe it was like their first, let's say it was your first time using Tor, first time using a Bitcoin mixing service, and you just think that you did it wrong. So you just keep sending it, like it's horrible. So yeah.
It's crazy. And so like, let's talk about how people can protect themselves, because essentially how this attack works is like, as you said, SSL stripping. It downgrades the web traffic from HTTPS to HTTP, as you said. But basically, when a user tries to like handshake with the website, it blocks it so that the browser looks at the connection and says, okay, they only support HTTP. And so that's why they like, okay, well, we'll just connect with HTTP. That's how everything is then transmitted in the clear and they can see things. But there are things that you can use which don't allow you to access a website unless it has HTTP. So there's a thing called HSTS, which is called HTTP Strict Transport Security. And just like a hat tip to my wonderful tech advisors, Kieran of the internet and Ruben of Zcoin. So basically, if you use this HSTS, then it says it's something that the server can set that basically tells the browsers to refuse to work if they aren't able to connect to HTTPS. So if you're using Tor browser, they automatically do this. On Brave browser, you can set this as a default, which means that you won't connect to sites unless they have HTTPS. So it's just a way of safeguarding yourself. Like if you are someone who uses cryptocurrency, uses Tor, you should make sure you have these things on, because this is a common man-in-the-middle attack that you can prevent just by being, smarter about the browsers that you're using and servers. So it makes sure that any traffic isn't able to be downgraded in terms of security. So just, it's, I mean, that'd be devastating, right? Like, as you said, a quarter of all exit nodes, that is a huge long-term, long game that they were playing. So it's, I
think they still have 10%. Like they were, the team behind Tor was able to, I think, patch or kind of block them, but not all of them. So they're still, I think they're still functioning. And it's also a repercussion of having like permissionless access to run a node on Tor, and with cryptocurrencies, anyone can do it. And unfortunately, there are bad actors out there. It's not the majority, but in this case, they were able to definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, if you're going to be your own bank, then make sure that you understand security protocols. Don't just immediately jump on the bandwagon of, I'll be my own bank, because banks spend a hell of a lot of money on security. They usually don't even do a good job, despite their huge resources they pump into this. So if you think that you can match that security, make sure you're doing the research and getting good tools for this, because it's not something to take lightly. So yeah, I mean, this is basically everything that I wanted to cover this week. It's a lot in there, but it's some crazy skins going on in the crypto space. Tomorrow I have a show, as I mentioned, with Paul Pui of Edge Wallet, and it's called Coin Watch. We're going to deep dive into Theo, which you guys may have heard about, and Chainlink, which, as I said at the start of the show, zooms to number 5 on coincap.io this week. So we're going to do a deep dive into these coins. What are they? Where did they come from? What is the history? What are the technical aspects? All of that. So if you want to tune in 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, feel free to send any questions in advance to my CoinTree page. And another thank you to the anonymous person who sent through that message. I will send that on to you, Heidi. And thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Everyone who sent super chats, really appreciate your support. run my channel with community support. So it's because of you guys that I can keep making videos. I appreciate that. Now, make sure when you leave this video, you click subscribe, you click like, and then you head over to Heidi's page and you check out her awesome content. You do the same thing there. Heidi, any final words before we wrap up here?
No, I really enjoyed this. It was great having a chat with someone in the crypto space. It's so nice to connect. You know, it's like everyone's all fractionated, but this crypto space is really cool. With there's toxic communities and there's open communication and stuff like this. So I really enjoy it. So thank you for inviting me. And
Absolutely.
I love you have a great channel as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. You'll have to come back. I'd love you to be a regular on this show. It's
for sure.
Great insight into all this. Everyone, thank you for watching. Go have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, Heidi, for joining me. Enjoy, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Clicking end, but who knows if it ends.